Sometime around March 1st, 1945, deep in German territory, a 24-year-old non-com from Kewanee, Illinois, stared down an enemy-held hunting cabin and made a choice that spat in the face of basic human survival. Circling around to the rear entrance, he booted the door off its hinges and entered solo, later telling a reporter, "He just went completely crazy." The soldier in question was Neville Brand, who bagged a Silver Star for that stunt before almost bleeding out from a bullet just 5 weeks down the line. Returning stateside, battered, traumatized, and hiding 30,000 books of intellect behind a mug that resembled a crumpled prizefighter, studio executives immediately pigeonholed him as the ultimate bad guy. For 35 years, he embodied mobsters, inmates, and assassins, playing Al Capone 3 times, dropping a BAFTA nod to Marlon Brando, and drunkenly tumbling off horseback during his own TV shoots. He pounded a pint of liquor daily just to function, since his internal combat never really ceased, while PR teams falsely hyped him as the 4th most decorated veteran of World War II. That claim was complete fiction, yet his actual, untold reality was far wilder. So let us break down 10 defining moments of the actual Neville Brand. Point 1 explores the fractured face, the gambling ring, and his rough upbringing, starting on August 13th, 1920, in Griswold, Iowa, a tiny Cass County dot lacking enough residents to pack a cinema. His dad, Leo Thomas Brand, wrangled iron for bridges, while his mum, Helen Louise Davis, ultimately raised a brood of 7 kids. As the firstborn, a 7-year-old Neville moved with his folks to Kewanee, Illinois, a blue-collar hub located roughly 140 miles outside Chicago. Leo maintained steady construction wages while the Great Depression choked the nation, but that safety net evaporated after his folks split around 1933 when the boy was barely 13. Being the eldest, the burden of his fractured household crushed down on him, forcing the teenager to hustle through random gigs to feed his brothers and sisters, while peers just played ball. He slung drinks, waited tables, pushed footwear, shined shoes, and joyfully admitted to a 1966 TV Guide reporter that he even worked an underground betting parlor for his ruthlessly tough old man. Speaking to that same magazine in 1971, the actor recalled his dad snapping his nose simply because the kid forgot to address him respectfully as Sir. Consequently, on October 23, 1939, barely 6 weeks post-Poland invasion, 19-year-old Neville marched into a National Guard station and signed away his life 2 whole years before America joined the fight. While local teens obsessed over dating and weekend parties, he committed as a grunt in Company F, 29th Infantry, Illinois Army National Guard, a move that makes sense looking at his grim circumstances. Dealing with an absent dad, an overwhelmed mum juggling 7 mouths, and nowhere gigs in a dead town, the armed forces finally provided guaranteed food, reliable cash, and desperately needed discipline. Come March 5th, 1941, exactly 9 months pre-Pearl Harbor, he re-upped for regular duty and shipped out for drills at Fort Carson in Colorado. Following a failed bid at Officer Candidate School, the soldier spent 3 agonizing years running domestic drills while battles burned abroad, until deployment papers finally dropped on December 9, 1944. He sailed for Europe and landed at the absolute worst moment, leading into Point 2 regarding 5 hellish months alongside the Thunderbolt Division, hitting the continent on December 16, 1944. That exact same afternoon, Hitler unleashed his final massive wager, sending 200,000 Nazi soldiers and 1,000 panzers crashing through the Ardennes to kick off the legendary Battle of the Bulge. Thrown into B Company of the 331st Regiment under the 83rd Thunderbolt Division, he joined a crew shedding blood since Omaha Beach half a year prior. Surrounded by completely battle-hardened survivors, the fresh 24-year-old squad leader arrived having absolutely zero real-world experience under enemy fire. The 83rd hit the Raw River by December 27, 1944, meaning he went straight from a transport vessel into Europe's goriest meat grinder after a mere 11 days. From then on, the man tackled the Ardennes, the Rhineland, and Central Europe back-to-back, enduring 5 unbroken months of pure battlefield misery. Earning the moniker of the Ragtag Circus, his unit sprinted 280 miles through enemy lines in 13 days, eventually freeing the Langenstein-Zwieberger Buchenwald subcamp around April 11, 1945. As early witnesses to the Holocaust's absolute depravity, he absorbed the total nightmare. taking in the freezing trenches, the blazing towns, his fallen brothers, and the hollow-eyed victims trapped behind razor wire. Very soon, he would pull off a stunt crazy enough to lock down the military's third highest award for absolute courage. Point 3 covers the machine gun nest rear entry and Silver Star on March 1st, 1945, during the Rhineland campaign when his unit was trapped. Enemy forces transformed a local hunting cabin into a fortified headquarters, shredding anyone who dared peek up from the mud with relentless automatic fire, while American casualties steadily mounted. With progress completely frozen, the squad leader threw logic out the window, later explaining to a 1966 TV Guide reporter that his mind must have just completely snapped. After deciding to storm the premises, he flanked the structure, located a back door, and aggressively kicked his way inside to solo the entire hostile outfit, using just a single Tommy gun. His official decoration paperwork highlighted his extreme gallantry and total lack of self-preservation alongside the 331st Infantry, which is basically bureaucratic slang for an absolute madman. Rushing a heavy artillery nest single-handedly completely bypasses standard definitions of courage, dropping straight into that terrifying territory where you either win a medal or die immediately. The kid basically caught both fates on different afternoons, bringing us to point 4 regarding April 7th, 1945, when his hard-charging 83rd Division relentlessly steamrolled remaining holdouts near the Weser River. Though victory sat just weeks away, the cornered opposition fought like cornered animals, eventually landing a devastating shot on the veteran. Pierced right through the upper bicep alongside that riverbank, he hit the dirt paralyzed, trapped under heavy volleys without any hope of reaching safety. Slowly leaking life into foreign soil, the sergeant later recalled the terrifying ordeal with absolute icy detachment, fully admitting that he knew the Reaper was finally knocking. He claimed fading away felt genuinely gorgeous, comparing the warm sensation to catching a really solid buzz. The future Hollywood alcoholic discovered his preferred flavor of numb detachment while draining blood at 24 years old in hostile territory, right before medics dragged his fading body into the 21st General Hospital. Bedridden during recovery, he finally secured his coveted medal, eventually taking an honorable discharge from Illinois' Fort Sheridan around October of 1945. Official separation papers backed up an insane stash of hardware, including the Silver Star, Purple Heart, Combat Infantryman Badge, plus 3 Bronze Service Stars slapped onto his European, African, Middle Eastern Campaign Medal. Hollywood still demanded wilder myths, bringing up point 5 about the biggest fabrication ever spun regarding his legacy. Endless promotional campaigns lied through their teeth for years, incorrectly crowning him the 4th most decorated hero of the Second World War. The actor constantly tried shooting down the garbage rumor, which initially sparked from a wildly exaggerated Paramount Studios press release that completely ignored reality. The studio's promotional packet spun a wild tale about him enlisting in the Premier Ranger Battalion at 16, supposedly surviving as one of 99 men from a 30,000 soldier force at Dieppe, but absolutely zero of that was true. Zero proof exists that he ever served as a ranger, and his brother Bryce even admitted to the Kewanee Star-Courier, following the actor's passing, that the press completely fabricated plenty of stories about him. While his real military history, including a Silver Star, a Purple Heart, and various campaign honors from 5 months of fighting, showcased true bravery, it simply didn't match the staggering accolades of icons like Audie Murphy. The real kicker is that the movie industry never had to exaggerate his achievements. Since a blue-collar boy from Kewanee who single-handedly charged a machine gun position and almost died bleeding out in Germany is plenty fascinating already. His genuine background was spectacular enough, yet back in the 1950s, PR executives simply craved a highly decorated veteran who possessed the rugged face of a ruthless bad guy. The authentic narrative of a guy silently battling his wartime demons just lacked that flashy promotional punch, even though reality proved to be infinitely more captivating than fiction. Studio marketers just couldn't figure out how to pitch his trauma. Moving on to point 6, involving the GI Bill, Charlton Heston, and a mug that wouldn't exactly outshine Clark Gable, because our veteran initially wanted to stay in the armed forces after returning home. Performing wasn't even a passing thought for him, yet a surprising twist occurred during his domestic training period when superiors ordered him to help produce military instructional videos. He later admitted that specific assignment completely rerouted his destiny, leading him to collaborate on a United States Army Signal Corps project in 1946, right after his discharge with another undiscovered, strong-jawed talent named Charlton Heston, leaving both young men completely oblivious to their massive upcoming stardom. Taking advantage of the GI Bill, he studied at the American Theatre Wing in Greenwich Village, eventually landing multiple off-Broadway roles, including a part in Jean-Paul Sartre's The Victors. Heading west to Los Angeles, he used those same military benefits to attend the Geller Drama School, offering a brutally honest critique of his own looks by admitting his rugged face would never steal the spotlight from heartthrobs like Clark Gable. Against all odds, an incredibly surprising truth emerged about this battle-hardened, deeply weathered soldier. He actually possessed tremendous acting chops. Far beyond just playing the muscle capable of faking a brawl, he possessed incredible emotional depth and truly grasped complex motivations, later breaking down his professional technique in a way that would leave elite drama instructors completely awestruck. He refused to play his characters as purely evil because the antagonist never views themselves as the bad guy, noting that even a murderer completely justifies their own horrible actions. His goal was simply building a realistic person based on the script's parameters, which he perfectly executed during his 1950 breakthrough in the legendary noir DOA as an unhinged thug named Chester. Critics at the Associated Press recognized it as his massive launching point, leading to a fantastic supporting gig next to James Cagney in Kiss Tomorrow Goodbye, firmly cementing the 30-year-old battered war hero into the glitzy movie business. He wasn't snatching up starring roles quite yet, but he became an incredibly precious commodity, a supporting talent projecting genuine menace onto the screen because the lenses perfectly captured the very real violence he had lived through. Fact number 7 involves barely losing a massive British acting award to Marlon Brando. Back in 1953, filmmaker Billy Wilder hired him for Stalag 17 to play Duke, the hostile captive clashing with William Holden's protagonist, allowing the veteran's real combat swagger to completely shine through. Viewers immediately sensed his profound connection to playing a prisoner of war, since he possessed first-hand experience, though his major breakthrough into household name territory didn't arrive until the very next production cycle. Don Siegel filmed Riot in Cell Block 11 directly inside Folsom State Prison, utilizing actual prisoners in the background, giving our guy his first major headlining gig as James V. Dunn, a desperate inmate sparking an uprising for better living conditions. Historical records show that upon securing the gig, he intensely promised director Siegel that he wouldn't merely act out the part of Dunn, but rather completely transform into the man himself, and he absolutely delivered on that terrifying promise. His portrayal felt so incredibly visceral and lived in that it scored him a British Academy nomination for Best Foreign Actor, putting him second only to Marlon Brando's iconic turn in On the Waterfront that awards season. Just think about that for a second. A regular teenager out of Kewanee, Illinois, who picked up drama skills via military benefits, went toe-to-toe for a massive global trophy against the 20th century's most legendary cinematic powerhouse. That exact same movie accidentally kickstarted another massive Hollywood legacy, serving as the absolute first industry gig for a youthful casting assistant who went by the name of Sam Peckinpah. By 1958, he snatched up an Elite Sylvania Award for his incredible turn as Willie Stark in a Sidney Lumet television special, earning massive praise from the New York Times for his gripping execution. The street-smart local boy suddenly found his name alongside cinematic titans like Wilder, Siegel, Lumet, and Brando, absolutely shocking his hometown. Moving to point 8, the guy famous for shooting Elvis portrayed Al Capone thrice and practically acted with every major star. He cemented his pop culture villain status by murdering Elvis Presley during the singer's 1956 cinematic debut in Love Me Tender, triggering intense nationwide backlash and literal death threats, while simultaneously becoming the earliest guy to play Butch Cassidy in The Three Outlaws. 13 years before Paul Newman owned that outlaw role, he was busy trading dialogue with Henry Fonda in Anthony Mann's classic western The Tin Star. Teaming up with Burt Lancaster for John Frankenheimer's celebrated Birdman of Alcatraz, he delivered a breathtakingly gentle performance as an empathetic corrections officer, providing a desperately needed break from playing relentless scumbags. Taking on the legendary mobster Al Capone 3 distinct times across the Scarface mob, the Untouchables television hit alongside Robert Stack, and the George Raft story, his uniquely terrifying interpretation became his absolute trademark because he never had to fake the underlying danger. That pure terror just lived inside his gaze, projecting the exact same stare that watched friends perish in icy combat trenches merely 10 winters prior. Acting opposite George Takei in an incredibly heavy Twilight Zone chapter titled The Encounter, he portrayed a World War II survivor masking a shameful past, creating massive irony as a real combat legend, playing a complete fraud, causing American networks to yank the episode for over 50 years. It remains the sole classic installment of that sci-fi series permanently shelved from television, though he kept booking varied gigs like working with John Wayne in Cahill, United States Marshal, doing Disney's That Darn Cat, and commanding sailors in Tora Tora Tora. Spanning roughly 35 years in the entertainment industry, the hard-working actor racked up more than 100 television and film appearances, yet his most commercially successful project almost pushed him entirely over the edge. Point 9 dives into his haunting psychological battles and physical collapses on set, starting when the NBC network handed him the 1965 comedic western Laredo, casting him as Reese Bennett, an abrasive, shouting, yet internally gentle lawman. The program pushed through 56 total episodes over 2 demanding seasons, handing him the most reliable income he ever saw, while simultaneously driving him to the brink, since his severe internal combat trauma completely refused to back down. Today's PTSD lacked any clinical title in the 1960s, so people just labeled his immense suffering as battle fatigue, shell shock, or simply being incredibly stubborn. To cope with the nightmare, his sole method of self-medicating involved chasing that exact same hollow, floating sensation he first discovered while bleeding out from a gunshot wound in Europe. He sought that hazy, drunken euphoria constantly, eventually giving a brutally transparent and completely heartbreaking interview to the Los Angeles Times in 1975, where he bluntly confessed that liquor morphed into his only medication. He admitted reaching a terrifying point where intoxication wasn't the goal anymore, and just feeling remotely functional or normal at the crack of dawn required him to desperately chug straight from the bottle. He needed an entire pint of strong liquor early in the day just to muster the courage to use the telephone, a terrifying reality that repeatedly caused his castmates on Laredo to look backward on the trail and spot a completely riderless horse. He would be completely hammered and tumble off his mount miles back, eventually earning him a temporary boot from the production, while executives heavily considered swapping his character out for Claude Akins. Fellow actor Peter Brown later praised him extensively, recalling that shooting a sequence with a clean and dry Neville felt as effortless as chatting at a bar, but staying sober remained the tragic asterisk attached to his massive reputation for his entire life. He survived 3 marriages, splitting from Jean in 1955, ending his union with Laura by 1969, and finally finding peace with a 3rd wife who loyally stood by his side until he passed away. Mary, Michelle, and Katrina were his 3 girls, but the bottle ultimately robbed him of his wealth, damaged his acting prospects, and wrecked a pair of marriages. That striking paradox truly became the defining hallmark of his private world. Whenever the liquor wore off, folks behind the scenes saw a surprisingly warm, sharp-witted, and incredibly devoted friend. When a female crew member fainted and went to the emergency room during a broadcast production, the actor physically blocked the exit to guarantee she was all right. He forced every single worker to stay put until 3 in the morning. Producer Chris Schultz mentioned that this protective action perfectly illustrated his moral compass. Yet nothing dismantles his rugged persona quite like the fact that this cinematic menace, known for playing thugs for 35 years, hoarded 30,000 volumes of literature. Boasting a literary treasure trove rivaling anything else in Los Angeles, this raspy-sounding movie thug secretly spent his downtime as one of the most obsessive bookworms in the entertainment industry. 1978 brought a devastating blaze to his Malibu residence, turning nearly all those precious pages to ash. Although he finally kicked his drinking habit, that hard-won triumph arrived too late to salvage his ruined livelihood, drained finances, and broken ties. Number 10 explores his rugged features, a silent passing, and an enduring mythos that simply will not fade away. His cinematic swan song arrived via 1985's Evils of the Night, a cheap production entirely unworthy of his skills. Following that flop, he walked away from show business to spend his final 8 years peacefully in Sacramento, California. He was light years away from the industry that exploited his rugged mug to terrify moviegoers for 35 years. On April 16th, 1992, the 71-year-old actor succumbed to emphysema at Sutter General Hospital in Sacramento. With his spouse and girls by his bedside, he passed on before a secluded memorial service honored his memory. Following the cremation, His ashes found their permanent resting spot inside East Lawn Memorial Park. The New York Times ran a headline calling the 71-year-old a rugged performer famous for playing rough bad guys. It was a tragically reductive way to summarize a decorated military hero who single-handedly charged into a hostile artillery position. They completely ignored the intellect who collected 30,000 books and the protector who locked down a room to shield an ailing colleague. Thankfully, his industry peers painted a much more accurate portrait of his true character. In an autobiography, Bruce Dern labeled him the toughest brute in Hollywood, placing Audie Murphy just behind him. Meanwhile, fellow performer Colleen Gray described his on-screen presence as the most genuinely sinister force she had ever witnessed. She quickly clarified that he was actually a brilliant and wonderful gentleman in reality. The Film Noir Foundation even hailed him as the ultimate cinematic scoundrel, calling his presence just as crucial to those gritty movies as Dive Bars and Broken Promises. The actor grasped his own dual nature perfectly and delivered the ultimate summary of his career. He openly stated that rough-looking fellas would outlast the conventionally handsome leading men in the movie business. He compared character actors to custom car parts, noting that their bizarre and unique features made them irreplaceable. Once an audience caught a glimpse of their unusual mugs, that image was burned into their memories forever. Even if they inspired night terrors rather than sweet fantasies, their legacy was bulletproof. That assessment was spot on for this Illinois native, a brave patriot who signed up for combat just 6 weeks following the Polish invasion. He earned a major medal by solo charging an enemy bunker, almost bled out on European soil, while sarcastically calling it wonderful, and used veteran benefits to study acting before losing a prestigious award to Marlon Brando. Yet studio executives simply saw a murderous thug, ignoring the brilliant mind that devoured 30,000 books. This recovering addict battled his internal demons relentlessly, fighting a private conflict that raged on until his dying breath. Yet his creative contributions will undoubtedly survive for as long as cinema exists. Military documents and his heroic commendation remain safely archived for history. His brilliant acting survives on celluloid, while that iconic, gritty persona is forever immortalized in pop culture. The entertainment industry ignored his immense talent until he made himself absolutely undeniable.